The first time they said my fence was illegal, I laughed because it sounded like a word meant to scare you. Illegal was for stolen cars and fake IDs, not for a cedar fence that had been in my backyard since before my daughter learned to ride a bike. Then I saw the letter, thick city paper, bold heading. Notice of violation, unpermitted fence construction. Failure to remedy may result in fines, lion, and legal action. And a deadline that made my stomach drop. 14 days. 14 days to fix something I didn't build. 14 days before fines started stacking. 14 days before my home became a case number. That was my legal and financial anchor in the first minute. Cities regulate fences. If they claim a fence is unpermitted, too tall in a visibility triangle, or placed inside a public easement, they can order changes, charge daily penalties, and in some places record costs that complicate refinancing and selling. A fence can turn into a lien problem fast, and once the paperwork starts, you're defending more than wood. You're defending equity, title, and stability. My name is Natalie Pierce, 37, single mom. I live in a suburb outside Denver, where the lawns are trimmed and the rules are treated like religion. My daughter, Ava, is 9. After my divorce, this house was my reset button. Not big, not fancy, but it had a backyard with a fence that made Ava feel safe. She could play without strangers watching. I could breathe. The fence wasn't new. It was here when I bought the place 2 years ago. It was in the listing photos. It was in the inspection report. The prior owner left a note in a kitchen drawer. Fence replaced in 2018. Enjoy the garden. So unpermitted construction didn't make sense, unless someone wanted it to. I called the number on the notice during lunch. After a long hold, a code enforcement officer named Martin Keene answered with a tired, neutral voice. "Ms. Pierce," he said, "we received a complaint about an unpermitted fence. We need to verify compliance." "I didn't build it," I said quickly. "It was there when I bought the home." "Responsibility transfers to the current owner," he replied. "If it's unpermitted, you have to bring it into compliance." "What exactly is wrong?" I asked. "Height and location," he said. "It appears over 6 feet within a visibility triangle near the street." "My fence is in the backyard," I said, pulse jumping. "Our file shows the side yard adjacent to the street," he said. My stomach tightened. "Can you email the photos?" He did. When the email came in, my chest went cold. The photos showed a tall fence with dark stain and metal posts. And it wasn't my backyard fence. It was the fence between my property and my new neighbor on the west side. Troy Mahoney. Troy and his wife, Lindsay, moved in 3 months ago. Troy had that confident, too loud energy. Work boots, big SUV, phone calls on speaker in the driveway. Friendly on the surface, but always scanning, always assessing. 2 weeks earlier, he'd leaned over the fence and said casually, "City's cracking down on fences. People don't realize how illegal some of these are." He'd planted the word like a seed. Now the seed was a deadline. I knocked on Troy's door with the notice in my hand. Lindsay opened, smiling too fast. "Did you report a fence?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Her smile flickered. "No, why would we?" Troy appeared behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes flicked to the letter, and his face stayed calm. "The city says my fence is illegal," I said. "These photos look like the fence between our yards." Troy shrugged. "If it's illegal, it's illegal," he said. "It might be your fence," I pressed. "Did you change it?" Troy's mouth tightened. "Fence was here when we moved in," he said. "Same as yours." Then why now? I asked. He smiled like it was none of his business. People complain, he said. Not my problem. But his calm felt practiced, like he'd rehearsed it. That night I pulled up my listing photos and then walked the fence line with my phone flashlight. Near the street, the posts changed. Fresh metal brackets, darker stain, new boards. The modification was recent, and it was exactly where the city cared most about visibility from the road. Troy had altered the fence near the corner. Then a complaint had been filed. Then my address was on the notice. It wasn't random. It was a setup. I scheduled the inspection for the next morning and told Martin I would be present. I also saved screenshots, listing photos, and the inspection report. If this became a paperwork war, I wanted receipts. At 6:30 a.m. the next day, I stepped outside and saw a contractor truck in Troy's driveway. 2 men were unloading fence panels. My heart started pounding. I walked to the property line, staying on my side. What's going on? I called. One worker looked up. Replacing the fence section, he said. Troy stepped out with coffee like this was a normal Tuesday. Morning, he said. You're changing the fence before the city inspection, I said, voice tight. He smiled. City's on us, he said. Gotta get it right. Then why did I get the notice? I asked. Shared fence, he said, casual. Shared responsibility. You should be glad I'm fixing it. I felt anger flare. Don't change anything until the inspector documents it, I said. Troy's eyes narrowed. I can do what I want on my property. It's shared, I snapped. He sipped his coffee. Then you can share the bill, he said. I'll send you half. There it was, the trap. He modified the fence into a violation, triggered enforcement, then replaced it with an expensive project and demanded I pay half. I started recording on my phone openly. Troy's gaze flicked to it. At 9 a.m., Martin arrived, measured near the street, and frowned. This section exceeds height within the visibility triangle, he said. Troy stepped closer, bright and helpful. We're lowering it, he said. Martin handed me a compliance sheet. Submit permit application. Adjust height near visibility triangle. Schedule reinspection. He warned fines could begin if unresolved. Then he left. 10 minutes later, Troy looked at me and said quietly, We split the costs. No, I said. His face hardened. Then city will fine you, he said. Not my problem. 2 hours later, an invoice hit my email. Half the replacement, $3,940, due in 7 days. I felt sick. I forwarded it to my friend Marin from work. She handled regulatory compliance at our clinic and had the calm brain I borrowed when I was spiraling. Don't pay, she replied instantly. Paying looks like agreement. Ask for permits and proof. Permits, proof, paper. I requested fence approval history from the HOA. They replied, no records prior to 2020 due to management transition. Convenient. I requested permit history from the city. They told me 10 business days. 10 business days. My deadline was 14 days. The clock was designed to make me fold. On day 3, Troy escalated socially. He taped a copy of the city notice to the fence facing my yard like a billboard. Ava saw it and froze. Mom, did we do something bad? My throat tightened. No, I said quickly. We didn't. I pulled the notice down and Troy shouted from his patio, Don't touch my property. Pay your share. He wanted shame to do the work his invoice couldn't. That's when I hired a real estate attorney. Elliot Park. Calm voice. Sharp eyes. The kind of attorney who doesn't get emotionally dragged into a neighbor's game. Elliot read everything and asked one question that changed the direction of the fight. "Did Troy pull a permit for the fence work he's doing right now?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. Elliot nodded. "Most likely no," he said, "which means he's trying to force you to pay for unpermitted work while using the city notice as leverage." He drafted a letter to Troy demanding permits, HOA, approvals, contracts, and proof of shared fence ownership. It also warned that unilateral modification and coercive invoicing could be actionable. Troy didn't reply with words. He replied with a small claims filing for the invoice amount, plus damages for delay. My hands shook when I saw the court notice. Paper always triggered old divorce fear in me. Courtrooms, filings, men who treat documents like weapons. Elliot stayed calm. "He thinks you'll fold," he said. Then Elliot did something smart. He filed a public records request for permits at Troy's address, and he found the motive hiding behind the illegal fence story. Troy had an active application for driveway widening and vehicle access modification. Driveway widening, near the corner, meant stricter visibility requirements. A taller fence would block approval. Troy didn't just want compliance. He wanted his project approved. He was using my fear to clear his path. We asked Martin for a meeting on site. Martin agreed. In the wind and bright morning light, Martin measured again. Elliot presented date-stamped photos showing the fence existed at my purchase and the modified section with new posts installed after Troy moved in. Martin turned to Troy. "Did you pull a fence permit for these changes?" he asked. Troy's jaw tightened. "No, I didn't think I needed one." "You do," Martin said flatly, "especially here." Elliot calmly mentioned Troy's driveway application. Troy snapped, "Not relevant." Martin's eyebrows rose. "It's relevant to visibility," he said. For the first time, Troy looked unsettled. The city wasn't a hammer anymore. It was looking at his hands. Martin updated the file to add Troy as a responsible party and instructed him to submit a permit for the fence modification. He also confirmed the violation was limited to the section near the street. When Martin left, Troy leaned toward me. "You're making enemies," he hissed. Elliot stepped slightly between us. "All communication goes through counsel," he said. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "Pay your share, or you'll regret it." I saved it and sent it to Elliot. He told me to document every contact. Pattern matters. Small claims court arrived fast. Troy showed up confident with invoices. I showed up with photos, the city meeting notes, and one crucial piece Elliot had spotted in Troy's own filings. Troy had written that my refusal was delaying his driveway permit and causing him financial harm. He admitted motive on paper. The judge, tired, practical, looked at Troy. "Did you pull a permit for your fence work?" he asked. Troy hesitated. "No," he said. The judge's gaze hardened. "Then you undertook work at your own risk," he said. "You cannot unilaterally modify a shared structure and then invoice your neighbor." Denied. Troy's claim collapsed in a single word. He walked out of that courtroom, stiff and red-faced, and for a day I thought he might finally stop. Then the retaliation came in tiny, plausible pieces. The kind that look like coincidences until you stack them. First, my trash can mysteriously rolled down the driveway overnight and ended up in the middle of the street. A neighbor texted me a photo with a question mark. I put the can back and told myself it was wind, even though the night had been calm. Next, my outdoor light bulbs were missing. Not broken, not loose. Missing. 2 fixtures on the side yard were suddenly empty, like someone had reached up and twisted the bulbs out with patient fingers. Then I came home from work and found my gate unlatched. The latch was a simple metal hook, easy to close, and I was obsessive about it because Ava liked to run. But there it was, swinging slightly in the breeze, and Ava's little marigold pot was tipped on its side as if someone had brushed past. I checked the camera footage. A figure moved along the fence line with a hood up, face turned away. The movement was fast and low. The angle was bad. It wasn't enough to accuse. It was enough to feel my stomach turn. Elliot told me to treat it like a pattern, not a moment. Upgrade your lighting, he said. Keep logs. Call non-emergency if you see trespass. But don't chase him. The goal is to stay credible and safe. Credible, safe. 2 words that shouldn't have to exist in the same sentence as backyard fence. I installed motion lights. I placed a small sign near the gate. Smile, you're on camera. Because sometimes the simplest deterrent is the one that reminds people they can't hide in the dark. Troy responded the way people like him always respond when they feel watched. He tried to flip the narrative. He reported me for harassment. I learned that when a police officer knocked on my door on a Tuesday evening and asked if everything was okay, his tone was careful, like he didn't want to be in the middle of neighbor drama. "Ma'am," he said, "we received a call saying you've been recording your neighbor and confronting his contractors." I felt heat rise in my face. "I recorded because he was invoicing me for work I didn't authorize," I said, keeping my voice calm. "And my attorney is involved. I have documentation." The officer nodded slowly. "It's a civil matter," he said, "but I'm advising both parties to avoid direct contact." After he left, I sat on the couch shaking, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because Troy was expanding his reach. City, HOA, court. Now, police. He wanted a file on me. He wanted to make me look unstable. So Elliot did something I didn't expect. He suggested we offer mediation. Not because we owed Troy compromise, but because it would create a record that I was reasonable and Troy was not. He drafted a simple letter. "My client is willing to participate in neighbor mediation to resolve any remaining issues regarding the shared fence line and future access. Please advise within 7 days." Troy's response came through his own attorney, a 1-page email dripping with condescension. "My client declines mediation. Ms. Pierce has acted in bad faith and must reimburse costs. Declines." Elliot smiled when he read it. "Good," he said. "That tells a story. A story the city and HOA would understand. One party escalating, one party offering process." Then Elliot sent another letter, this time certified mail, to Troy and Lindsay. "Do not enter Ms. Pierce's property. Do not tamper with gates, fixtures, or landscaping. All future communication must be in writing through counsel." It was firm without being dramatic. It drew a line in ink. And for a few days, it worked. The gate stayed latched. The lights stayed on. The neighborhood felt quieter. Until Lindsay tried one more move. She approached Ava. It was small, and that's why it was so ugly. Ava was playing in the yard when Lindsay leaned over the fence and said, in a voice that sounded sweet but carried a hook, "Your mom is making a lot of trouble. That's why people are upset." Ava came inside with her eyes wide. "Mom," she whispered, "did I do something?" My chest cracked. I walked outside, kept my voice calm, and said, "Do not speak to my child about adult disputes." Lindsay blinked, feigning innocence. "I was just being friendly," she said. "Elliot told me to write it down. Date, time, words, witness if any. Because the fastest way to break someone is to make their child feel unsafe." and the fastest way to expose someone is to document it. That night, I emailed the HOA board about it. Not emotional, just factual. Neighbor made comments to my minor child about ongoing disputes. Please advise neighbors to avoid involving children. The HOA board replied with a short note. We remind all residents to keep disputes between adults. It wasn't justice, but it was another paper brick in my wall. By then, I wasn't just fighting for a fence. I was fighting for the right to exist in my own home without being psychologically pushed out. And that's why, when the permit history finally surfaced, it didn't just feel like a technical document. It felt like a lifeline. But Troy escalated again through the HOA. He filed an architectural complaint against my fence and demanded HOA enforcement. My inbox filled with notices: hearing, violation, possible fines, 2 enforcement machines now, city and HOA. At the HOA meeting, Troy played the same story. Illegal fence, irresponsible neighbor, shared responsibility. I stayed calm. I showed listing photos. I showed the city update adding Troy as responsible and requiring him to permit his modifications. Elliot asked the committee a simple question. Do you have records approving Troy's recent changes? They didn't. The committee chair, Paula, looked tired. We'll table enforcement until the city process is complete, she said, and we will not be used as leverage. Troy's face darkened. After that HOA meeting, Troy didn't back off. He got quieter, which was worse because quiet meant planning. The next morning, my sprinkler system turned on at 3 a.m. and ran until sunrise, flooding the side yard into a shallow lake. I stumbled out half asleep in sweatpants, fumbling with the controller, and saw the wiring cover open. The dial had been twisted to manual. It wasn't a glitch. Someone had touched it. I checked my camera app. The side camera had gone offline at 2:47 a.m. When I rebooted it, the footage jumped from 2:41 to 3:10, like a missing tooth. My skin prickled. Troy knew where my cameras were. He'd watched me install them. He'd watched me check them. I called Elliot with my voice shaking. My camera was offline, I said, and my sprinklers were turned on. Elliot didn't sound surprised. Document it, he said. But don't accuse him without proof. People like this want you to look unstable. Keep building a clean record. Clean record. That phrase became my mantra. I replaced the camera with a newer model and moved it higher. I saved screenshots of the outage logs. I wrote down the time, the weather, the puddles. I felt ridiculous doing it. Until I remembered how ridiculous it felt the first time my ex lied in a deposition, and how that lie mattered because I couldn't prove what I knew. The next escalation came in the mail. A letter from my homeowner's insurance carrier. We have received an inquiry regarding a property violation and potential liability exposure. Please contact underwriting. My breath caught. Insurance companies don't inquire unless someone pushed them. I called the number and explained. The underwriting rep sounded polite, but the questions were sharp. Is there an active code enforcement case? She asked. Is there a visibility hazard? Has the city ordered removal? Has there been an accident or claim? No, not yet. But the fact that my insurer knew meant someone had filed something, or someone had called and flagged me as a risk. The moment I hung up, my hands started shaking. If my insurer decided the property was non-compliant, they could raise my premium. In extreme cases, they could refuse renewal. A fence dispute could ripple into money I didn't have. I forwarded the insurance letter to Elliot. His response was immediate. This is part of the pressure campaign. We'll respond in writing once we have the corrected city record. For now, do not volunteer extra speculation. Pressure campaign. That was the right phrase. Troy wasn't just fighting me. He was trying to make every institution around me, city, HOA, insurance, feel like a threat. Then my lender called. It wasn't dramatic. It was a voicemail. Hi, Ms. Pierce. This is Carla from Mortgage Servicing. We received a third-party alert about a possible code issue at your property. Please return my call to confirm status. Third-party alert. My throat tightened. I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. Carla explained that sometimes lenders receive automated alerts when municipal cases are opened. It's routine, she said, but we need to document whether there's any lien risk. Lien risk. That word made my chest tighten. It was one thing to fight my neighbor. It was another thing to fight the idea that my house could be flagged in a system that affected credit, refinancing, and future choices. I told Carla the case was being reviewed. The fence was pre-existing, and I had counsel. She asked for written documentation when available. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the wall for a long time. Ava came in and asked if she could play outside, and I almost said no out of pure fear, because my brain had started linking the yard to danger. That made me angry enough to stand up. Yes, I told her, go. The yard is ours. I watched her run along the fence line, ponytail bouncing, and I promised myself I wouldn't let paperwork steal her childhood. That afternoon, Elliot sent a second letter, this one to the city's compliance supervisor, requesting a formal correction of the violation classification and a hold on penalties pending permit history review. He cited the listing photos and the lack of fence permit applications in the last 90 days, and he asked the city to clarify whether fines would accrue while records were being retrieved. The supervisor responded with a bland email. Fines are discretionary and may be assessed if compliance is not achieved. May be assessed, the kind of language that keeps you anxious. So Elliot scheduled a conference call with Martin and the supervisor. On the call, Elliot stayed calm and precise. He repeated the same points until they couldn't ignore them. The fence existed at purchase. The complainant photos matched a newly modified section. Responsibility should not be pinned solely on me without investigating who altered the fence. And the permit history retrieval delay was a city-side issue. After 20 minutes, the supervisor finally said, "We will hold fines pending review." Hold fines. It wasn't a win, but it was oxygen. Troy didn't know that yet. He still thought the clock would crush me, and he kept tightening it. 2 evenings later, Lindsay approached me while I was taking out trash. Her voice was sweet, almost pitying. "Natalie," she said, "this is getting messy. You're stressed. Ava's stressed. Why don't you just pay half and be done?" I stared at her. "Because I didn't agree," I said, "and because your husband created this." Her smile thinned. "You don't know that," she said. "I have photos," I replied. Lindsay's eyes flashed. "You know," she said softly, "some people don't realize how much trouble they can get into when they fight the city." There was the threat, wrapped in concern. I felt my pulse spike, but I kept my voice even. "Some people don't realize how much trouble they can get into when they file false reports," I said. Lindsay's smile froze. Then she turned and walked away like I'd insulted her at a dinner party. That night, my new camera caught something. At 11:52 p.m., Lindsay walked along the fence line near the street with her phone held up, taking photos. Then she crouched and pointed at the base of the fence, like she was capturing a specific angle. She looked around twice, then walked back inside. The next morning, I received an email from the city. Additional evidence submitted regarding visibility obstruction. Additional evidence. Lindsay was feeding the case like a fire. Elliot told me to forward the footage to him immediately. We keep it clean, he said. We show the city who is pushing this and why. He sent the footage with a short note. Please add to file. Neighbor actively submitting new evidence while performing unpermitted modifications and pursuing driveway expansion. 2 days later, the city scheduled a field verification with a different inspector. This inspector, a woman named Celeste, arrived with a tablet and a tone that felt more rigid than Martin's. She measured. She took photos. She asked questions like she was building a case. When I told her the fence was pre-existing and permitted, she said, "We don't have a permit record." "Because your database migrated," I said carefully, "and the records request is pending." Celeste's lips tightened. "That's not my problem," she said. The phrase hit me like ice. Not my problem. Troy's favorite line, now coming from the city. Elliot called it what it was. Personnel variability. Some are helpful, some are rigid. That's why we rely on documents, not personalities. Celeste left without committing to anything. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about how fragile security is when it depends on someone else's mood. I thought about my divorce, about how one judge's patience and one lawyer's aggressiveness could change outcomes, and I realized this fence fight was doing something deeper to me. It was re-triggering every moment I'd had to prove I wasn't lying, that I wasn't overreacting, that I deserved to be believed. I got up and opened the closing binder again, flipping through pages until I found the title insurance policy. I hadn't thought about it since closing, but Elliot had mentioned earlier that title and municipal issues can overlap if liens are recorded. I called the title insurer and asked a simple question. If the city recorded a lien for fence fines, would my policy help? The rep explained gently. Title insurance typically covers defects in title at the time of purchase, not future code violations. But if a recorded document or easement issue was misrepresented at purchase, there could be coverage. Not a clear yes. Still, the call reminded me, the paperwork world has layers, and if you don't know them, someone else will use them. By the time the city permit history finally arrived on day 10, I was exhausted in a way sleep didn't fix. I'd been living in alert mode for a fence, and Troy was counting on that fatigue. That afternoon, the city permit history request finally came back. There was a 2018 fence permit approved and closed for my address and Troy's address, a shared boundary fence replacement, permitted, inspected, closed. My eyes burned. The fence was permitted, which meant the city's unpermitted fence construction notice was wrong, at least as a blanket claim, but the city could still enforce height and visibility rules if code had changed or if modifications were made. And modifications had been made. By Troy. Elliot forwarded the permit record to Martin and requested immediate correction of the notice classification and removal of unpermitted language, as well as reallocation of responsibility for the modified section. Martin responded within hours. Thank you. This permit record was not available in our initial search due to database migration. We will update the case. Database migration. A fancy way to say, we didn't look hard enough, but now the record existed. Now the truth had a stamp. Martin scheduled another inspection. This time, he measured the modified section near the street, noted the new posts, and confirmed that the fence height in the visibility triangle needed reduction. He also noted that the rest of the fence complied and was permitted. Then he did something that shifted everything. He issued a revised notice, addressed to both homeowners, specifying that the violation was limited to the modified section and that the responsible party for remedy was the homeowner who performed unpermitted modification, Troy. After the permit record surfaced and the city corrected the case, Troy still tried to salvage control. He acted like he was complying, but he kept pushing behind the scenes. He submitted his fence modification permit with incomplete drawings, hoping the city would rubber stamp it. They didn't. They requested revisions. He blamed me for dragging things out. He muttered loud enough for me to hear when I was in the yard. He wanted me to feel guilty for his delays. Then he tried the social route again. At a weekend block gathering, he told people I was fighting the city and refusing to fix an unsafe fence. He said the word unsafe like it was contagious. A couple neighbors looked at me with that cautious, polite distance people use when they don't want drama touching them. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did what Elliot taught me. I kept my voice calm and my facts sharp. When one neighbor asked quietly, "Is everything okay?" I said, "The fence is permitted. The city is addressing a modification near the street. It's being resolved." No embellishment, no emotion, just truth. The next week, Martin inspected Troy's lowered section and signed off on the visibility compliance. The city closed the violation with a note that no fines would be assessed due to correction and record clarification. When I saw that email, my shoulders dropped for the first time in weeks. And that's exactly when the easement letter arrived. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pivot. Elliot called it the second lever. If they couldn't scare me with permits and invoices, they'd scare me with easements and the idea that my fence could be torn out by strangers. The planning department's letter used vague language, maybe required, because vague language makes homeowners do the work of panic on themselves. It makes you imagine bulldozers. It makes you offer compromises you don't owe. Elliot refused to let that happen. He asked for specifics. Which utility, which project, which timeline, which authority. Without a specific utility need, the letter was just a warning. While we waited, Lindsay filed another report, this time claiming my fence blocked access to a utility box. She included photos of a green telecom pedestal near the sidewalk. The pedestal was on the public strip, and the fence was behind it. The claim was nonsense, but the photos were persuasive if you didn't look closely. Elliot responded with a map. The pedestal location, the property line, the easement strip, and the fence line. He attached the 2018 easement acknowledgement and asked the department to stop processing repetitive, unsupported claims. Pedestal. I walked him out and showed pedestal. I walked him out and showed him. The pedestal was clear, no obstruction. He shook his head. "People do this," he muttered. "They weaponize tickets." Weaponized tickets. Hearing it from a stranger made something harden in me. I wasn't imagining it. It was a pattern people recognized. The technician closed the ticket as no issue. Elliot added that closure note to our growing file. He also requested that the planning department flag repetitive complaints from the same source as potential harassment. That request changed the tone. The planning coordinator finally called Elliot directly instead of sending vague letters. Her voice was cautious. "We've received multiple submissions," she said. "We just have to make sure we're not ignoring a safety concern." Elliot's voice was calm. "You're not ignoring," he said. "You're being used. There's a difference." Silence. Then she asked for the permit file number. Elliot gave it. She pulled it up. She saw the easement acknowledgement. She saw the inspection closure. She saw the technician's note. And her tone softened. "We'll mark this as informational only," she said. "No enforcement action." Informational only. It meant the easement letter would not become an order. It meant Lindsay's lever snapped. That afternoon, I was in the yard with Ava, helping her plant a little pot of marigolds along the fence, when Troy stormed out to his patio. He didn't look at Ava. He looked straight at me. "You think you won," he said, voice low. I kept my hands steady, even as my pulse jumped. "I didn't want to fight," I said. "I wanted you to stop." Troy laughed without humor. "You don't get it," he said. "This neighborhood needs standards." Standards. Another word for control. Ava looked up at me, confused. I smiled softly at her and said, "Keep planting, honey." Then I looked at Troy and said, calm and clear, "If you contact the city again with false reports, my attorney will pursue harassment claims. The record is closed." Troy's face tightened. For a split second, I saw uncertainty. He wasn't used to women who didn't shrink. He went back inside, slamming the door. 2 weeks later, his driveway contractor stopped showing up. The permit denial had killed the project. The concrete pad sat unused like a monument to his ego. And then the "for sale" sign appeared. When the realtor's open house flags went up, Lindsay avoided me completely. Troy acted like he couldn't see my house. He kept his eyes on the ground as strangers toured his rooms. They said my fence was illegal because they thought that word would make me small. They thought deadlines would make me pay. They thought paperwork would make me fold. But I learned something in this fight. Something I wish I'd learned before I spent years shrinking myself to keep other people comfortable. I looked at Ava and knew I wouldn't apologize for protecting us. Facts beat fear. Records beat rumors. Evidence beats intimidation every single time. And the next time someone smiles too calmly while calling the city, I won't panic first. I'll open my binder. I'll pull the permit. I'll read the code. And I'll remember that my home isn't just where I live. It's what I protect.